Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another question the narrative video, and today's topic is the Fomorians, the Celtic Nephilim giants. Quite some time ago, I'm going to say possibly even a year ago, I did a video on another tribe of Celtic Nephilim, the Tuatha. They are actually of the fairy bloodline, and many people in the comments for that video suggested that I look into the Fomorians, who were also Celtic Nephilim, although I don't know that many people make the connection between the Fomorians being Nephilim. Now, those of you in this community, I'm sure you made that connection, but I should just say in the secular community, or what we might call in the normie community, they probably don't do that. But I'm finally getting around to it, and we're just going to take many different paths that we can find on the Fomorians, because there's a lot of information about them. Not all of the information is exactly the same, but that happens with folklore. And as you know, while a lot of the things that we learn in these folklorish tales may not be accurate, there is a lot of truth to be found in them as well. And we also do know that the adepts do use legomanism in these folk tales to kind of pass truth around amongst each other. So if you don't know what legomanism is, I did talk about that in one of my other Question the Narrative videos. It might even be the one on the Tuatha. I'm hoping that. And so I'll link the Tuatha video at the end of this one. But for now, let's just get started learning about who the Fomorians were. Okay, I decided to check and make sure that that was the video, and it was not the video apparently on the Tuatha. I will still link that at the end of this video. It was this video of mine that I made called Is the Fairy Kingdom Real and Who Are They? That I talked about legomanism because I had first learned about what it was too. And it is extremely relevant when it comes to these fairy tales and these folklore stories that we hear about. So I wanted to just point that out to you so I wasn't pointing you in the wrong direction in case you were looking for that information. I'm going to start by reading from Emerald Isle. That's the name of the website. And we're just going to read bits and pieces of this article. I will leave a link in the description box for you, just so that we can get an idea of who the Fomorians were, because I'm going to be honest, even when I was looking into the Tuatha, I hadn't heard of the Fomorians, which I don't know how I missed it, because apparently they were like the arch rivals of the Tuatha, unless I just skimmed over it because I was looking for different information. But let's find out who these beings were. Irish and Celtic myths and legends, Irish folklore, and Irish fairy tales from the mythological cycle, antediluvian half-demons of the netherworld. No tale of ancient Ireland could be complete without mentioning the Fomorians, dreaded foes of the Tuatha and all who came to conquer Ireland. The meaning of their name is debated even today, although most agree that the first part, fo, means from below or nether, and the latter part means the sea, demons, or giants. And when you read of their deeds and doings, you could be forgiven for thinking all three were accurate. Descriptions of the Fomors and their behavior are strange and conflicting in the old legends. Some tales tell that they were phenomenally ugly and celebrated this ugliness, even driving out children who were normal in appearance, taking deformities as a mark of favor from their dark gods. One Fomor might have a large arm and a small arm, while another might have 2 heads and another 3 eyes. Other tales claim they were born whole enough, but became strange in mind and appearance after exposure to the occult light, degenerative radiances, and blasphemous smokes of their eldritch rituals. Some believed that they had the heads of goats, although it may be more likely that they wore goat masks, and others that they were related to the drowned titans of Enoch, the Nephilim. In the Book of Invasions, it is said they had but 1 leg, 1 eye, and 1 arm. Of course, this is a misunderstanding of the crane stance, a posture they struck when they were casting spells and working magical mischief against their enemies. I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to go back to the part that talks about the name Fomorian. And as it said before, the beginning part, fo, means from below or nether, and the latter part means the sea, demons, or giants. And this is very, very interesting because many Nephilim are associated with coming either from the underworld or from the sea. If you've seen the movie Pan's Labyrinth, you know that it is about a creature who lives underground who just so happens to have the head of a goat, just as the description of these, or at least some of the descriptions of these Fomorians are said to be. So we have a tie right there between Pan, who was a Greek god, and being in the underworld or the underground. I think now would also be a good time to bring in two specific verses from Genesis that are relevant to this. So we have Genesis 6:4, which I'm sure many of you already know. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. So if you do not know who the Nephilim are, they were the children of human women and what have been called the sons of God, or in the book of Enoch, they are referred to as the Watchers. Now, the flood in Genesis 7:23 says, "He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark." And if you do look at all of the translations, and if you do look in the Hebrew, it does say the face. And when you think of a face of something, don't you think of the top layer? Okay. So the question is, were there things in the ground that survived? Or in fact, if you look at the word that is used for earth, it means ground or land. So the earth is not referring to the planet, it's referring to ground or land. So we'll just say dry ground. So could it be that the things in the ocean, those Nephilim who lived in the ocean, because there were said to have been these lowercase g gods who did live in the oceans, could they have survived? And could that be where these Fomorian giants came from? Additionally, could they have come from under the earth? Because if it says on the face of the earth, is it possible that under the earth, that what might be called the nether regions or the underworld, the underground, could things have also survived in there? And could that be also where they came from? And theirs was the old magic, the power of the worm they held as a great mystery, that antediluvian sorcery from before the great floods, which destroyed the ancient world in its corruption and wickedness. That also ties right in with the Nephilim before the flood, because the book of Enoch tells us that the Watchers passed on forbidden knowledge to the people of that time, and unmistakably their children, the Nephilim, would have gotten this forbidden knowledge as well. Gary Wayne calls this the spurious sciences. They had these technologies that people of that time weren't supposed to have, and that unmistakably explains why there are so many amazing megalithic structures that we can't possibly describe or explain how they could have been built if we actually look at our history the way that it's presented to us. You know, they always try to make it sound like the people who lived in antediluvian times were just cavemen, so to speak, and didn't really know much of anything. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And in fact, if the people of that time knew that much, imagine how much more the children of these Watchers knew. Legends tell that they could control the weather, the mists, and the waves of the ocean, bring blight upon the crops, sickness upon the cattle, and plague from their festering pits upon the people. The icy blasts of winter were theirs to command, and deadly spirits from chthonic halls could they summon to question about the past or future or events far distant. Here it says, they were the first in Ireland, arriving with 200 men and 600 women, surviving on wild birds and fish, and may have been responsible for the building of many of the earliest megalithic monuments, those aligned to the equinoxes rather than the solstices, the moon rather than the sun. They fought the Fir Bolg for domination of Ireland and defeated them in the first battle of Moytora, but their conquest brought the malevolent gaze of the Fomors to bear. Still weak after the battle, and with their great king Nuada dethroned due to losing an arm, the Danann, so these are these rivals, they're talking about the Tuatha De Danann now, held council and decided it would be best to make peace with the Fomors for fear of annihilation. In these tales we learn that not all of the Fomors were hideous in appearance or vicious of temperament. One of their kings, Elatha, was called the beautiful Miltonic prince of darkness with golden hair, and songs praise his wisdom, kindness, and mercy, associating him with light and the sun. He traveled across the sea in a silver ship and wore clothes of gold and 5 gold torques. Interestingly, the Tuatha De Danann did end up, some of them, breeding with the Fomorians. There are legends which say he was the father of Bres, who came to replace Nuada as king of the De Danann by Eriu of the Tuatha De Danann, as well as Delbaeth Agma Elath, who was grandfather of Manannan Mac Lir and the Dagda by an unnamed mother, but many of these claims are confused and uncertain. That he was father of Bres the Beautiful is no doubt, however, even though Bres became a king whose reign the Tuatha were to regret. For 7 years, the half Fomor, half De Danann, so there again, they were breeding together, Bres led the people and brought them great sorrow, enslaving them and taxing them heavily, as had been done to the Nemedians. And the rest of this article, well, most of this article is actually more of the lore of the Fomorians. So if you would like to read this, you can just click on it in the description. I will leave that there. But I also do have another article from study.com about the Fomorians. Who are the Fomorians? Ethnic groups around the world often possess unique cultural, religious, and spiritual beliefs. I will add in here that it's interesting though how you will find that many of the lore, many of the beliefs around the world have many, many similarities. In some ethnic groups, these traditional beliefs are often described as mythological creatures within stories that provide explanations for phenomena experienced by people in their everyday lives. Concepts such as birth, death, the afterlife, weather, fertility, and the changing of the seasons represent common themes explained by different mythologies. Many people are often familiar with the mythology of ancient Greece and Rome. However, other cultures in Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America all have rich mythological histories. I'm also going to add North America, which somehow they missed there. And I would say Australia too. Anyway. In Ireland, for example, one creature featured prominently in Irish mythology is the Fomorian. Who are the Fomorians? The Fomorians are a group of mythological beasts, often referred to as Celtic giants. The name Fomorian is derived from 2 Celtic words meaning below, fo, and the sea, mer. Indeed, as suggested by this derivation, the Fomorians are typically described as sea monsters that bring chaos and destruction to humans. And here's just a list of other names for the Fomorians. And down here you have to unlock it to read the rest of it, but that was just the summary that I was looking a little bit for. So let's just explore some of these concepts that we've learned about the Fomorians. Now, as was mentioned, there are many varying descriptions of the Fomorians. But if you think about the fact that they were descendants of the Watchers, we don't know what type of beings the Watchers were. As Dr. Michael Heiser would say, a lot of these terms like cherubim, seraphim, angel, and possibly even watcher, they describe the job of the being, but they don't really describe what they are. So, with that being said, the Fomorians may have been a tribe that kind of did look different because it had different sorts of beings as their ancestors, and that's just my guess. But here's just taking a look. So as you can see, a huge difference here. So this is one more of the goat type ones, although this is more of a headpiece, I think, that makes them look like a ghost. And that's similar to what the article said, that it may have just been, masks that they wore that looked like goat heads. Here we have, just one of the depictions of them as being these really grotesque, misshapen creatures. This is more of the goat head type of being. They were also described as being very hairy as well. And so this is Balor. This is one of the kings of the Fomorians. And as you can see, he is a cyclops, and that is another way that they are described. Besides having goat heads, they are also sometimes described as having only one eye. And this one, I think, is also supposed to be Balor, but if you see, at least from looking at this, it looks like they drew, oh, yeah, maybe he does only have one eye. It just looks like one of them possibly was taken out in battle. I'm not sure. But yes, Balor was supposed to have only had one eye. And if you actually do go back and look at the article that I had been reading from, it does have a story about Balor, and it does mention the fact that he had one eye. Yeah, so here it says, Balor of the evil eye was one of their great kings, and for this power was he named. So vast was his form and terrifying eye that it took 4 men to lift the lid, since he kept it closed while amongst his own folk. So, as I mentioned before, the lowercase g gods had many associations with the sea, with the ocean, with coming from inside the ocean. And it wasn't just Poseidon. We tend to think of Poseidon or Neptune because Greek and Roman mythologies are the most popular forms of mythology for some reason. And I think that they're all super interesting. But is it possible that these Fomorians may have come from under the sea because that's where their parentage came from? That's just one question that I had. And then the other idea is possibly, again, of the underworld. And there is ties to the Nephilim and Rephaim giants to the underworld as well. I found a very interesting quote in a book that I have by Dr. Michael Heiser called Demons, What the Bible Really Says About the Powers of Darkness. And I just want to read to you a part of it about these giants. It says, the unusual offspring that resulted from the forbidden union described in Genesis 6, 1-4, the Nephilim, are analogous to the post-flood hybrid Apkallu. And I'm just going to jump over to the other page where it tells us that the Apkallu were Mesopotamia's divine culture heroes. Okay, so the Apkallu were also divine, and they were also either 100% God, or some of them were descendants of the gods. I'm going to go back to the other page, and this is page 121 if you have this book and wanted to check, what I'm reading. The biblical material has the Nephilim as giants, and further describes them as mighty men, or Gibberim, and men of renown. According to Numbers 13, 32-33, the giant Anakim, also called Rephaim and Amorites, were descended from the Nephilim. The correlation of the hybrid Apkallu with the Nephilim and their descendants is reinforced by the description of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamian sources. So yet we have here another story of another giant in another culture. And that's, what I was referring to earlier, is just the similarities in these stories around the world. So we've already talked about the Hebraic story of the Nephilim in the Bible, in the book of Genesis. And then we have the Apkallu of the Mesopotamian folklore. And we also have the story, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And also the Celtic now, the Fomorians, and again, the Tua Dedanan. So you might be wondering why I just read to you about the Apkallu, because I wanted to establish context for what I'm going to read to you now, which is also from the same book from Dr. Michael Heiser, and this one's on page 148. And it says, "It is a little known fact that Apkallu are occasionally depicted as malevolent beings in Mesopotamian literature, who either angered the gods with their hubris or practiced witchcraft. The Apkallus occur at least twice in the anti-witchcraft series Maklu as witches against whom incantations are directed. The fact that Apkallu are born and often reside in Apsu is not evidence that points to their exclusively positive character, since demonic creatures were also often thought to have their origins in the depths of the divine river." So you might be wondering what the Apsu is. Well, I'm just going to read a footnote. It says, "The characterization of the Apkallu as fishmen points to their origin in the watery abyss in Mesopotamian religion. Apkallu are also characterized as birdmen, a likely image associated with their divine nature." So obviously the Apkallu are not exactly the same. These creatures, though, these beings were said to be associated as being birdmen, sometimes called fishmen. These beings in the Fomorians are associated with goats. But one thing that you do see that they both have in common, at least if you look at the name of the Fomorians, is that they both are said to have come from the watery abyss. So we do know that some of these Nephilim could very well have survived the flood down there in that water, or it could have been, a second incursion that happened, and that's how these creatures came about. Let's just take a look at what the Abzu is. It's the name for fresh water from underground aquifers, which was given a religious fertilizing quality in ancient Near Eastern cosmology, including Sumerian and Akkadian mythology. Lakes, springs, rivers, wells, and other sources of fresh water were thought to draw their water from the Abzu. In Mesopotamian mythology, it is referred to as the primeval sea below the void space of the underworld, Ker, and the earth, Ma, above. And I just want to allude back to the story in the Bible where Jesus drives Legion into a herd of pigs, and then they go off the cliff and end up in the water. I just think that's a very interesting comparison as well. Abzu is also considered a deity, but only in the Babylonian creation epic. Let's see. The Enuma Elish, taken from the library of Assurbanipal, which is about 500 years older. In this story, he was a primal being, and that's Abzu, was a primal being made of fresh water and a lover to another primal deity, Tiamat, a creature of salt water. The Enuma Elish begins, "When above the heavens did not yet exist, nor the earth below, Apsu, the freshwater ocean, was there, the first, the begetter, and Tiamat, the saltwater sea. She who bore them all, they were still mixing their waters, and no pasture land had yet been formed, nor even a reed marsh. This resulted in the birth of the younger gods. One, Enki, would later contain Apsu when he plotted to kill them because of their noise. Enraged, Tiamat gives birth to monsters, filling their bodies with venom instead of blood, and made war upon her treacherous children, only to be slain by Enki's son Marduk, the god of storms, who then forms the heavens and earth from her corpse." That also has a lot of similarities with Greek mythology, when Zeus and Poseidon and everyone, when they murder their own parents. Well, in some stories they murder their parents, and in other stories they put them down in Tartarus. But again, there's many similar allusions as well. I also find the idea of a primal being made of fresh water, and then a creature of salt water. And what is happening in Genesis 1? The Spirit of God is hovering over the face of the waters. So many interesting ties. We could just go on and on forever with this stuff. Even today, in the 21st century, there does seem to be a bit of, you might call it folklore, other people will call it evidence, that there are still underwater civilizations. And some of those are called USO bases. In case you don't know what a USO is, it just means unidentified submerged object. So just flip out the word flying with the word submerged. And yes, there are so many claims. And these, as you can see, these are military photos taken of these objects, either in or right above the water after they had exited the water. And there are stories about these as well. So here we have one. It says, forget UFOs. Let's talk about unidentified submerged objects. And you might be wondering, what does that have to do with the Fomorians? I'm just trying to establish that there could very possibly be civilizations under the water. What do they always tell us about the ocean? What is it that we've only explored? I think it's 5 to 10% of the world's oceans. Imagine what else is down there. So let's just read a little bit about this. It just says, the U.S. government has no proof that sightings of unidentified aerial phenomena are the result of alien activity. And I'm certainly not saying they're like aliens, outer space, planets, stuff like that at all. I'm just trying to establish possibility of things living under the water. Apparently, though, the definitely probably not aliens have been observed operating unidentified submerged objects in our oceans. They fly too, but when they want, they just disappear beneath the waves without a trace. So this article does include a video, so I'll leave a link if you want to go back and watch it. I just don't want to, just because I don't want to have any copyright issues or anything, but the video has reportedly been verified by the Pentagon and shows an object flying around the ship before dropping into the water and disappearing. According to Gallaudet, this object's capability jeopardizes U.S. maritime security, which is already weakened by our relative ignorance about the global ocean, which is what we were just talking about. We don't, at least if we listen to what they tell us, we don't know what's under the ocean. I think there's a very good possibility that they know far more what's in the ocean than what they're telling us. We know what they want us to know, basically. In a March 2024 report, he also wrote, the fact that unidentified objects with unexplainable characteristics are entering U.S. water space and the DoD is not raising a giant red flag is a sign that the government is not sharing all it knows about all domain anomalous phenomena. Oh, that's an interesting name. But yeah, that's exactly what I just said. It's entirely possible that this object and others like it are simply advanced aircraft operated by the Chinese military or another hostile foreign government. Pilots, credible observers, and calibrated military instrumentation have recorded objects accelerating at rates and crossing the air-sea interface in ways not possible for anything made by humans, he wrote. Which, again, they don't tell us everything that they know, so that may not be the case. I do have one more article about it. I just want to find where it's at. Okay. And this is just about, again, the underwater UFOs. They've shown the ability to seamlessly transition from air to sea without a splash or crash debris, are an urgent national security concern with world-changing scientific ramifications, an ex-Navy officer said. And this is basically the same thing that it just said in the other one, that it's a red flag that these things are able to operate in this area. And this is just a hotspot map. That says UFO, though. I was looking more for USOs in this one. To meet the security and scientific challenges, transmedium UAP and USOs should be elevated to national ocean research priorities. So, you know, according to these people, there are things underneath the ocean. So again, if we can do it now, I'm certain that there are things that lived there throughout all of this time, that have been there all this time, especially if they are descendants of these gods who were kind of confined to those areas. And could that possibly be where the Fomorians came from? I'm thinking, yeah, it's a very good possibility. Why they would have the heads of goats, though, that's another story altogether. So that's one that I'm like, okay, well, if the Fomorians did come out of the ocean, would they necessarily have the heads of goats? I don't know. But, it's, as I mentioned before, we're just kind of trying to piece everything together. And as the article mentioned, it could very well have just been goat masks. So, that's why it's called Question the Narrative, because I'm just questioning all of this stuff because it's fun and interesting. And as I mentioned, the Nephilim also being associated with the underworld and the underground. A lot of times people look at the Tuatha De Danann and don't necessarily think of them as Nephilim. They think of them as being fae-folk, which they are. They were part of the fae, the fairy bloodline, the elven bloodline. But they are also Nephilim. That's where all of those other bloodlines came from. And they also were said to have gone underground. We also have the stories, coming out from Afghanistan of the giants, and they come out of these caves that very likely lead underground. So there are all of these associations with the underground and with Nephilim. Interestingly, Azazel, who was said to be the leader of the Watchers, is sometimes depicted and said to have had the head of a goat. So, there's some speculation that the Fomorians could have been descended from him, if that's indeed what they looked like. And in that case, I would say that it would be more likely then that they would have come up possibly from under the ground. And I showed him in my Seder video. That's pretty creepy. I don't know if it's real or not. It's pretty creepy, but this is, something akin to what is described, at least when it comes to the head. From what it sounds like, the Fomorians they had hairy bodies, and they would have been much, much bulkier and larger than this. And this is another goat head creature. Does it look familiar to you? This is the Baphomet. So, yeah, another association there. And then we just have, again, sometimes they were depicted as Cyclops, which they also could have been related to the Cyclops of, Greek mythology. And the Cyclops of Greek mythology, I believe that the Nephilim of that area were said to be associated with the Scythians. And the Scythians were also said to be the ancestors of many of the people up in the Celtic areas. So there's so many things that tie all of these stories together, all of these creatures together, all of these cultures together. And again, like I mentioned, Pan's Labyrinth, goat-headed creature, that takes this, he lures this little girl under the ground because that's where he lives. And actually, the spiral things and the fact that he lures a girl underground, that's kind of very disconcerting if you catch on to what I'm saying. So I don't like that one bit. But yeah, that's what I think of when I think of these Fomorians. I think that I covered everything that I wanted to. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to check out my YouTube membership, I will leave a link in the description for that, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day. And now I'm just going to add on a few more seconds because every time that my videos stop at 33 minutes, I get people in the comments acting like I did it on purpose. So I'm going to get it past 33 minutes and get to 34 minutes. And then I'm going to end this video. Have a good day.